Tower Bridge is blocked by fanatics screaming outside the Houses of Parliament, OK? When that form of racism, when people are singing songs and doing what they're doing, Sadiq Khan does nothing, and yet he's in charge of the police.
Well, I'm not entirely sure it's right to say he does nothing. I mean, the police
Does he do enough? I'm not saying that... I am not in any way saying that Lee Anderson's language is right, in any way. What I'm saying is we need to be able to have these discussions in this country, don't we?
We do, and I think, you know, the police have been making arrests, and sometimes it does appear that perhaps they have been bordering on the side of inaction, where you'd like to see more action. But it is a very sensitive and emotive issue, and they are conscious of not wanting to inflame it further. I think that, as you say, that there is a sort of line that has been crossed with some of this language here. And that in itself can then further inflame the situation. And, of course, the context of all of this has been this discussion around the security of MPs. Whilst the vote on the ceasefire was taking place last week, there was an enormous protest outside. You could hear it from my office. And there is a sense of which that may be a bit intimidatory, but it is really important that protest is allowed to continue, because otherwise, where does that sort of emotion go?
No, but there's the point. Of course, protest. But you said, and I quote, the police wouldn't want to inflame it. The police are supposed to
heavy-handed...
But standing with your arms folded isn't heavy tactics. With the greatest respect, Kat, the police did absolutely nothing last week to those demonstrators, did they?
We do have a right to protest.
Of course we do, but not if it's extremism.
I think what might inflame things is how this plays out. And we've had Conservative ministers today saying things like...
nothing.
The Transport Secretary said what Lee Anderson said was wrong, but didn't say it was racist. We've got Baroness Varsi saying, look, there could be a situation here where anti-Muslim racism is tolerated by the Conservatives. If they don't handle this well, this could inflame much further.
It could. And, I mean, we need to be clear here with what we're conflating. I mean, in all the discussion around this, people are talking about Lee Anderson, they're talking about the debates that we need to have, they're talking about Islam in this country. You know, we're talking about lots and lots of different things, and I think we need to separate them out. What Lee Anderson said was racist, it was horrific.
Absolutely.
It's entirely right that he's had the party whip suspended, and I hope that the party doesn't have him back in. We need to question with the Conservative Party why they did not also remove the whip from Suella Braverman. She said exactly the same thing, but she's still sitting there as a Conservative Party MP. The Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak, Oliver Dowd, and none of them have justified why that is the case. Liz Truss over in the US, a different set of issues, but similar, justifying the far right, you know, making far right comments, sitting with far right people.
I'm not in any way, Mikey. I am not in any way. I think his language is... I called it vile. I think it's completely... But I've said that. I think it's absolutely vile to ever use language like that. What I will fight against is, whilst we're saying absolutely there should be protests, there absolutely should be, we shouldn't be scared of having conversations about certain things for fear of upsetting. But let me take the argument I had last week. Oh, you favouring anti-Semitism. No, I'm not. But for years, Jewish people have been persecuted in this country, and nobody has said jack.
I think it's unhelpful to make the comparison. What we need to say is, in this situation, what Lee Anderson said was wrong.
No, I agree. Listen, I've said all morning he was
wrong.
And why the Tory party won't do anything about it, patently, is that the red wall is what got them in. And for me, the real issue here is Rishi Sunak, who has, by his own stupidity, he's not able to move. He brought Braverman in and got rid of her. He made Lee Anderson deputy party chairman, knowing what he was.
There is a strand within the Conservative Party that is deeply uncomfortable with not just the comments that Lee Anderson made, and not just the article that Suella Braverman wrote over the weekend, but, of course, some of her comments date back from the time when she was Home Secretary and she was talking about grooming gangs and so on. There are several Conservative MPs, not just on the sort of moderate wing of the party, but throughout, who are really unhappy with this and unhappy with her actions throughout her time as Home Secretary. And I was speaking to some of them yesterday to sort of try and get a sense of why do they think there is this distinction being made between her comments and those of Lee Anderson. And one of them said, look, you know, the argument is that in Lee Anderson's case, he made a comment about a specific person rather than a sort of more general principle. But he admitted it is a big stretch.
Because Suella Braverman's comment, she said Islamists are in charge of Britain. I mean, that was an incredible article, really, that she wrote on Friday. I mean, incredible for the choice language that she used, which is what she did as Home Secretary as well, which lost her that position.
But I blame Sunak for that.
Well, how do you think the Prime Minister's going to handle this? Because right now he's tried to sort of hold this middle ground.
Well, I mean, the Prime Minister basically hasn't spoken out about it at all. He put out a statement the other day referring to extremists and anti-Semitism, I think, and not even referring to Islamophobia. He seems afraid to go near the issue, which is a complete
our first
failure
Prime
of leadership.
Minister of colour is too scared to go near the issues.
Which is staggering.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? I mean, Braverman should have removed his Home Secretary, which should have been appointed first, in the first place. I mean, Truss, actually, if you remember, had to sack her, and then Sunak brought her back about 4 days later.
To get the job.
Do you think the Prime Minister is paying the price now?
He should be sacking her now.
Do you think he's paying the price now of having people like Lee Anderson and Suella Braverman that he knew? There's no surprise what their comments are, what their views are.
Explicitly for that reason.
Exactly. And now maybe that strategy that Rishi Sunak has tried to deploy has come back to hurt him.
Yes, but I think the concern is, and this I think speaks volumes of his insecurity, his weakness as Prime Minister, is that they are concerned that Lee Anderson may be now flirting with joining Reform. They are concerned that if they withdraw the whip from Suella Braverman, the same thing might happen. And she is obviously a kind of lightning rod for the right of the party and for Conservative members, who we all know don't hugely like Rishi Sunak, aren't very happy that he is Prime Minister. There could be a kind of wider rebellion.
There's this sort of feeling, if you're me, that this is a man who wanted it so badly, probably knew it was only going to last for 2 years, reached out. I mean, he talked about change when he walked into Downing Street and gave Gavin Williamson a job. At that point, I just thought, you're nuts. And is it, as Rosie quite rightly said, is it all coming home to roost, Mike? Because actually, I reached out to Braverman to get the job. I thought I'd appeal to the Red Wall by giving Lee Anderson. Oh, my God, what a mess. That's the reality, isn't it?
Sunak has demonstrated that he's not up to the job of Prime Minister in so many ways. He's going, and the economy is still flatlining. They're promising more tax cuts, but they can only pay for that by ripping even more money out of public services, of course. Things are just going in the wrong direction. They haven't brought waiting lists down. He promised to stop the boats, which was a ludicrous thing to promise because there was no way he's going to be able to... he's demonstrated that in so many ways. But yes, in some ways, maybe the worst thing has been him choosing to associate with the furthest right elements of the Conservative Party, and indeed putting these people up and indeed making Lee Anderson deputy chairman of the party, as if it's a great thing. But one thing I've found staggering in a lot of the coverage over the last few days, and it seems to be present in the Conservative Party, maybe with Sunak, is this lazy assumption that people in the north of Britain all think that people like Lee Anderson and Suella Braverman are wonderful, and they basically just, once you get north of Watford, everyone seems to turn into a racist, which is an appalling thing to think about. People, I mean, I live in Sheffield. People in Sheffield are not sitting there thinking Lee Anderson is wonderful. And indeed, if you look at the polls...
But mate, if you... No, I'm not... Listen, don't get me wrong, but, I mean, that's a bit rich from a Labour supporter, because the very reason you lost the last election, with the greatest respect, and we've talked about this privately, is because the Labour Party always thought that anybody north of Watford Gap was going to vote for, the party of working people.
That isn't true.
And they abandoned them.
We lost because of Corbyn, we lost because of Brexit, we lost because of levelling up, actually. But one of the reasons the Conservatives are going to lose the whole Red Wall this time around is because they've completely failed to level up. They promised they were going to make a difference.
Agree.
They've made no difference.